Powerful ancient temples. On the islands of Gozo and Malta, a well-preserved temple complex known as the Gigantea Temples is said to be one of the most important and well-preserved sites in the world. Older than the Stonehenge and even the Egyptian pyramids. It wasn't until recently it was proven to be younger than the Turkish site of Göbekli Tepe. Its name in Maltese means giant, which makes sense because there are some stones that weigh over 50 tons. Animal bones discovered inside the temple indicate strange rituals were once conducted here. Fieldwork done in Malta by archaeologists show that buried deep within the earth were traces of ancient DNA from animal skulls and bones. In its heyday, the area probably numbered several thousand people who visited the elaborate sacred sites, but after 1,500 years, residents mysteriously vanished. Drilling into the earth core, archaeologists studied sediment using carbon dating to understand how the area could sustain so many people for so long, only to later be abandoned. Researchers found that in centuries past, soil erosion and climate conditions worsened, affecting not only the food and harvest, but the livestock that fed the people. Scientists also found that the number of trees diminished and the bones of the humans living at the time were wrapped with evidence of dietary deficiencies. After analyzing tree rings in the area, researchers also found that the region suffered a catastrophic climate change around 2350 BC, which may have been caused by a volcanic eruption. Even though the people of the area struggled to survive, the temple complex at Gigantea remains as a testament to the importance of the area and the lasting legacy of these ancient people. Books bound in human skin. Scientists determined in 2014 that a book called Destinies of the Soul was bound in human skin. They believe that the morbid literary work was covered with the flesh of an unidentified female mental patient who likely died of natural causes. Another book bound in human skin, owned by the Bristol Records Office in England, is covered with the skin of 18-year-old John Horwood, who was the first man to be hanged at Bristol Jail. The disturbing work details Horwood's murder of a woman named Eliza Balsam. Following his execution in 1829, the infamous murderer William Burke's flesh was used for binding a small brown pocketbook, which is stamped with his death date. The appalling artifact contains no pages and would have been used for storing money and other personal effects. How and why the criminal skin was used in its manufacture remains a mystery to this day. Emma Black from the Royal College of Surgeons told the BBC that a piece of Burke's flesh allegedly disappeared during a dissection of his body. Shortly thereafter, the book turned up for sale in Edinburgh, Scotland. Numerous other criminal skin was used in bookbinding, including that of George Cudmore, a murderer from Devon, England, who was hanged in 1830 for killing his wife. Cudmore's flesh was used to cover an 1852 copy of the poetical works of John Milton. Although public records confirm that Cudmore's body was dissected after his execution, how and why samples of his skin were kept long enough to bind a book remains an ongoing mystery. Quite clearly, someone held onto the biological material for several decades until they decided to use it in the bookbinding process. Chan Chan, Peru. Many civilizations leave behind objects that offer a glimpse into ancient life. For the Chimo culture of Peru, a recent discovery of wooden sculptures was located at an archaeological site in 2018. Found in the main entrance to the massive citadel Chan Chan, the 19 sculptures were located in a corridor that was decorated with mud reliefs. The head of Chan Chan Research and Conservation believes that the location of the sculptures could possibly mean they were guardians of the site, and were often used to mark tombs of important figures in the Chimu culture. Measuring about 2 feet high, each sculpture is more than 750 years old, with each holding a scepter in one hand and a trophy head in the other. They're also wearing clay masks with circular shields on their backs. The archaeologist in charge of the excavation believes that they are the oldest known sculptures on the site, possibly belonging to the middle stage of the Chan Chan, between 1100 and 1300 AD. Even more remarkable are the other discoveries at the site, including zoomorphic motifs with a feline or lunar animal, as well as the discovery of the sacrifices of 140 children and 200 llamas. Yikes. A pre-Incan culture, the Chimu emerged along the northern coast of Peru between 1100 and 1470 AD, and with Chan Chan as its political and religious capital of the Chimu civilization, it isn't difficult to imagine that these discoveries played an important role in local culture. Lascaux cave paintings. A complex of caves in southwestern France, Lascaux is estimated to be about 20,000 years old. Lascaux was first discovered in 1940, immediately being given statutory historic monument protection that same year. It's just one of several decorated caves in the valley. The hauntingly beautiful cave paintings were in peril of being lost to history. The paintings depict large animals that are once native to the region cover the walls of the cave. The Paleolithic cave paintings are renowned for their exceptional quality, size, and sophistication. Over 200 archaeologists, anthropologists, and other scientists gathered in Paris to discuss the plight of the treasures in the Lascaux caves in order to find a solution to preserve them. But the paintings weren't the only thing to be preserved within the cave. Nearly 2,000 figures that can be grouped into three main categories, including animals, human figures, and abstract signs. Over 360 of the paintings are horses, with 90 stags and a number of drawings that represent cattle, felines, and other animals. One enormous bull that measures 17 feet long is considered the largest animal ever discovered in cave art so far. Various sections have been identified in the cave, including the Great Hall of Bulls, the Shaft of the Dead Man, and the Chamber of Felines, to name a few. Sadly, since the year 2000, the Lascaux caves have been threatened by a fungus blamed on the air conditioning system combined with high-powered lights in the presence of too many visitors, disturbing the site. As black mold started to grow, authorities closed the caves to not only visitors, but scientists and preservationists in an effort to preserve these ancient artworks. An important cultural heritage to the history of humanity, Lascaux is one of the crowning jewels in rock art, offering an insight into the ancient culture, beliefs, and practices of the first humans. Venetian vampire. Archaeologists were shocked when in 2006 they discovered the remains of a female vampire in a 16th century mass grave of plague victims on the Venetian island of Lazzaretto Nuovo. The woman's mouth was held open by a brick that had been jammed into it, reflecting an exorcism technique that was used on suspected vampires in Europe at the time. This was the first discovery of the remains of a suspected vampire. A few years later, researchers conducted a study to learn more about who the woman was, what she looked like, and why exactly she was accused of being a vampire. They determined that she was between 61 and 70 years old when she died. She mostly ate vegetables and grains, indicating that she was of a lower class and lived a rather ordinary life. Despite this, she lived exceptionally long, especially for a European woman during the Middle Ages. At the time, many people believed in vampires. This notion was partially fueled by a dark liquid that flows from an unpreserved corpse during the decomposition process. When gravediggers reopened mass burials to add newly deceased bodies, they may have mistaken the fluid as the blood of vampire victims. Burial shrouds were sometimes soaked and sank into a dead person's mouth, making it appear as if they had come back to life and chewed on the cloth. Vampires were blamed for the plague, and people believed that they could stop the disease from spreading by inserting objects into the corpses' mouths. Several other so-called vampires have been found since the Vampire of Venice was discovered, including one that was unearthed in Poland in 2014. Silver coffins of Prague. In the 1980s, before the fall of communist rule in Czechoslovakia, a special task force of the Czech Interior Ministry discovered a mysterious cache of long-lost 18th century decorated coffins of Italian Grand Duchess of Tuscany, Anna Maria Francisca, and her husband. Located in an unmarked sanctuary crypt in Zakopane Gothic Church, the lavish coffins were richly decorated, a fitting tribute to Anna Maria, who was part of history's infamous Medici family, a wool-trading family from Tuscany who rose to social and political prominence in the 1400s. As an integral part of European culture, the Czechs are well known for their use of the Baroque style in not only their architecture and art, but apparently in their decoration of coffins. It would take 5 years from the initial discovery for any documentation of the coffins to initiate, but eventually, the two agents who participated in the original operation hosted a film crew to reenact the discovery. A detailed report of the expedition was filed with the Czech Ministry of Culture and the Litomyjice Diocese, which is part of the Roman Catholic Church in Prague. Sadly, as recent as 2005, the coffins were reportedly still in the watery underground of Zakopane Castle, left to rot. A sad ending to not only the lives of Anna Maria and her husband, but for such beautiful coffins whose artistry deserves to be celebrated. Tikal, Guatemala. In the lowland tropical forest of eastern Guatemala, the ancient Mayan city of Tikal sits shrouded in thick rainforest. Until the 19th century, some of Tikal's temples rose over the top of the dense jungle canopy and were taller than most modern buildings in the New World. At the end of the 10th century, though, the inhabitants of Tikal mysteriously disappeared, leaving only howler monkeys, spider monkeys, parrots, and other jungle life. Over time, archaeologists have uncovered 3,000 structures with more than 200 sculpted stone monuments and over 1/6 of a square mile altered area. Strikingly, many of the structures here remain undisturbed and intact, unlike many other archaeological sites around the world. At the center of the site, the ceremonial Great Plaza sits surrounded by steep pyramid-like temples paved with limestone and used for epic religious rites over the centuries. Several ball courts, including one in the main plaza, were also located. Here, ancient sporting events took place. It has been said that the penalty for losing any of the matches is death for the leader of the team. Some scholars believe the victors were treated to the honor of a ceremonial death. Temple 1, at the top of a vertical 170-foot staircase, requires a mountain goat to help one get back down. Temple 2, 145 feet above the Great Plaza, is surrounded by a number of other temples where visitors can climb to the top to get a view of the stunning scenery below. From above, visitors can see the white rooftops of other temples that poke through the forest canopy and whisper secrets of the hidden civilization and the mysteries of the Mayans. Why would they choose a location that was near no river or major body of water? Although no one is completely sure of what happened to the Mayans of Tikal, some believe drought may have been the reason why the civilization suffered. For now, the site remains a testament to the Mayans and is a site frozen in time. Six-headed chief. Back in 1997, archaeologists discovered a strange six-headed human burial in the Scottish fishing village of Port Mahomac. Dubbed the Six-Headed Chief, the bizarre grave was found near the altar of a former parish church. It initially appeared to contain the remains of one man surrounded by 5 skulls. Upon further examination, experts determined that the burial consisted of 2 individuals and 4 additional skulls. DNA evidence revealed that the remains belonged to 2 men who were buried sometime between the 13th and 15th centuries. They were probably an uncle and nephew or 2 cousins. 3 of the skulls were identified as one of the men's grandmother, mother, and father. The other mysteriously belongs to a Pictish monk who had died sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries, several centuries earlier than the others. He was originally buried in a nearby cemetery, and his skull was perhaps a weird, cherished family relic. Graves containing beheaded skulls and body parts harvested from relatives' graves are about as unusual as it gets for the time period, in the words of archaeologist Cecily Spall, who spoke with Live Science about the discovery. One of the men, thought to be a local leader, bears signs of violent suffering leading up to his death, with half of his face being either cut or bludgeoned off, and 2 of the grave's inhabitants were originally buried within a church, suggesting that the family was of a high-ranking social status. But exactly who they were? Nobody knows. Strange religious relics. If you thought a rotting coffin wasn't creepy enough, Prague has a number of other strange relics that may make your skin crawl. In case you didn't know, religious relics aren't just blessed items. They can include the physical remains of a saint or someone considered holy. Yeah, that means they're often bodies or body parts of holy figures, and they're considered sacred among their believers. They don't only come from the Christian religion. There are also relics related to Buddhism. Because these items are seen as sacred, they cannot be treated as simple objects. They're considered holy and represent the history of the religion they belong to. Since having a relic in one's possession means that the item must not only be revered but protected, they're often kept in an elaborately decorated reliquary or ossuary, which are containers to protect the item. In Prague, a few of the notable relics include 24 mummies located in the Capuchin church in the town of Brno. Over a period of 300 years, the monks placed their deceased brothers in the underground crypt. Because they've taken a vow of poverty, the monks simply reused the one coffin they had, each time moving the body of their fallen brother aside to enter another. The dry air inside the crypt allowed the bodies to preserve where they lay, still dressed in their ceremonial robes, clutching rosaries and crucifixes. Other relics in Prague include 12 strangely painted skulls located in an ossuary under a church in the town of Kryny. In 1991, archaeologists located a walled-in tomb that had skulls with laurel wreaths drawn in coal on the bones. As 2 other churches were surveyed, an underground crypt revealed the hidden remains of almost 1,000 people, placed there after the local cemetery was abolished. Although hoarding the bones of long-dead holy people might seem strange, they were highly sought after, with even the first Holy Roman Emperor demanding every altar should have its own relics. Because of this decree, finding and obtaining these important remains became a competitive undertaking, with a black market for such items flourishing. As worshippers flocked to the churches and cathedrals to catch a glimpse of these relics in the hopes of some sort of healing power, or the opportunity to witness a miracle in their presence, the quest to obtain those relics that would attract the most visitors turned holy relics into a business. Do you think it's strange that relics like these are considered holy? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Byzantine Church. In December 2020, the remains of a long-lost Byzantine church was discovered by archaeologists in Jerusalem. Located next to the foundations of a 2,000-year-old Jewish ritual bath, the structures were located not far from an area that was believed to have been the site of the Last Supper. Built on the spot where Judas was said to have betrayed Jesus before heading off to Roman soldiers, the church, with its finely carved stone elements, is believed to have been an important historical site. Named the Church of the Agony and the Church of All Nations, the building was found with Greek inscriptions on the floor for the memory and repose of the lovers of Christ. Accept the offerings of your servants to give the remission of sins. Researchers believe the inscription alludes to Jesus' sacrifice. The Church of All Nations is built over the rock on which Jesus is believed to have prayed in agony before he was crucified. It's near the foot of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, with a garden full of ancient olive trees. During construction of the modern-day church, which was completed in 1924, parts of the original floor were discovered and are now displayed under glass for protection and to offer insight into the time when the previous church was first constructed. The modern-day church is the third church to have been built on the site. Inside today's church, only natural light filters, with much of the interior left in semi-darkness to evoke a somber tone. In the ceiling domes, a star-studded night sky is recreated with olive branches reminiscent of the garden outside. Shockingly, a man was arrested in 2020 for trying to set fire to the church. After being spotted pouring a flammable liquid inside, he was quickly detained and questioned by a security guard. A number of the pews were scorched, but luckily, the fire didn't spread to other parts of the sacred site. An important part of the Catholic region, the site believed to have been referenced in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, is one that remains sacred to all those who visit. Deformed skulls. When Rome collapsed during the 5th century, the empire swiftly abandoned its territories in the Pannonia region of what is now central Hungary as the Huns invaded Central Europe. In the meantime, foreign groups traveled to Pannonia seeking refuge and joined the localized Roman settlements. These rapidly changing population dynamics cause a cultural shift that today's experts are still trying to understand. Since 1961, dozens of deformed skulls have been unearthed from a cemetery within the region. Out of 96 burials, 51 bore evidence of a practice called skull binding, which involves artificially stretching a person's head throughout their childhood by tightly wrapping it. This permanently altered the skull into what we often think of as an alien-like appearance. This extreme tradition of body modification dates back to the Paleolithic era. It spread throughout Asia during the 2nd century BC and thereafter made its way across Europe. The graves represent 3 distinct groups and span 3 generations from 430 AD until the site's abandonment in 470 AD. An isotope analysis of the bones showed that some of the later burials were occupied by people who were from the immediate area and had lived there under Roman rule, while others migrated there after being displaced elsewhere. These groups had noticeably different burial customs, yet all 3 practiced skull binding, reflecting its spread across various cultures. They used different binding techniques, further indicating that it was one of several cultural practices that were exchanged between the groups as they learned to cohabitate with one another. Bronze Age Queen. When archaeologists uncovered a grave in La Almoloya, Spain, they had an inkling the remains were of someone important. Buried with almost 30 silver objects, including a rare silver diadem or jeweled crown on her head, the woman was believed to have been buried around 1700 BC. They also discovered silver earlobe plugs, silver bracelets, and a necklace, with the items totaling about 230 grams of silver. As scholars surveyed the items, they concluded that the woman's crown was a symbol of power to the El Argar society, who lived in southeastern Spain from 2200 to 1550 BC. Strangely, the woman's remains were found inside a large pot. There were also the remains of a man with her. The man, however, didn't have the same elaborate objects as she did, giving further proof to the idea that she was a woman of great importance. Interestingly, 4 other diadems had been previously discovered in the area, and all were recovered in the graves of women, pointing to the possibility that they were political or economic leaders in their time. The remains were found under the floor of the palace, where researchers believe people gathered for meetings rather than drinking or entertainment. Considered one of the wealthiest burials of the European Bronze Age, the woman was obviously one of great power and control, and to have her remains placed at what may be Western Europe's earliest palace, she was obviously a woman of great importance and not just the partners of ruling men. Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman is one of the most impressive Inca constructions in all of Cusco in Peru, but it is also one of the most mysterious ancient constructions on the planet. Built in with a zigzag pattern, the fortifications of Sacsayhuaman were built in 3 tiers with 22 walls that represent the teeth of a puma. The entire area is in fact the shape of a puma when viewed from above. The walls are built from precisely cut stones that weigh over 300 tons and fit tightly together like a jigsaw puzzle. American researcher Derek Cunningham analyzed the design of the fortress and reached the conclusion that the civilization that thrived here had ancient knowledge of astronomical alignments of the moon, sun, and the planet. It truly is a stunning display of ancient architecture. The archaeological site was once the heart of the Inca Empire. Researchers believe that the Incas were not the first people to build on the site, with sections originally constructed as early as 1100. A once vast complex, the inner area of Sacsayhuaman had 3 large towers in a temple dedicated to the sun, which is believed to be one of the most sacred places in the Inca Empire. Located within the main fortress, the Cochincanas, thought to have been an Inca cemetery, is just one of a number of spiritual places on the site. One of the main mysteries of Sacsayhuaman is how exactly the megaliths that made up the 3 main walls were moved into position. Without access to draft animals or the wheel or lever for construction, no one knows for sure how the Inca were able to achieve such an incredible construction, with some of the rocks so close together that you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. It's clear to see that the Inca had a secret to constructing their massive cities that still remains hidden. Shrieking death whistles. The Aztec shrieking death whistle sounds like a screeching zombie, according to a Discovery article describing one of the most arguably terrifying sounds a person might ever hear. This macabre musical instrument may have had numerous purposes, but archaeologists don't know what they all were. One thing experts are sure of, however, is that the shrieking death whistle played a role in human sacrifices. During the 1990s, researchers unearthed the 500-year-old decapitated remains of a sacrificial victim in Mexico. He was clinging to a death whistle, which one of the scientists blew into, causing it to emit a high-pitched, death-like scream. The instruments contain a structure that generates different airstreams, and one diametrically hits against the other to create the shrill and noisy sound, according to music archaeologist Arnd Ajaboth, who spoke with Gizmodo. In addition to their role in human sacrifices, the shrieking death whistles may have been used for military purposes and/or in healing rituals. Unfortunately, all experts can do is speculate about their role and significance in Aztec culture. Ancient Aboriginal stencils. The rock paintings found in Australia are an important link to the continent's past. Recently, archaeologists believe they found the technique that made this ancient art so lasting. Most of the stencils used to create the rock art were large, with ancient Aboriginals placing their hand against the wall and then spraying liquid pigment to create shapes. But when 17 stenciled paintings were found that were a lot smaller, researchers set out to find how they were created. Over 500 years old, the small paintings depicted a variety of scenes including humans, animals, and geometric designs. Using material that is native to the region and with the help of indigenous Mara people who helped with the experiment, the team reproduced the ancient art with small models sculpted from beeswax. Using beeswax wasn't uncommon, and it was traditionally used to make toys and to repair spears. So scientists realized that beeswax or another similar resin or clay would have been used to make the small stencils. After heating and shaping the beeswax, they were able to recreate the miniature stencils. The earliest known examples of rock art are about 44,000 years old, with similar stencils found in New South Wales and an island in Indonesia. Believing the artwork was done for religious purposes, researchers stress that the unique nature and number of stenciled art are important finds in documenting not only rock art in Australia, but how it compares to similar cave art depictions around the globe. Egypt's Bent Pyramid. 25 miles south of Cairo, Egypt, you will find the 4,600-year-old Bent Pyramid at Dashur. Strikingly different from the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Bent Pyramid has sloping sides that are believed to be the first attempts by ancient Egyptians to build a smooth-sided pyramid. As data was collected, researchers found that by studying particle accumulations collected inside the pyramid, they might be able to learn how it was constructed. Using thermal technology and particle analysis, they're trying to unlock the secrets of the construction. It was built by King Snefru, the first king of Egypt's 4th dynasty. The pyramid rises at a 54-degree angle at its lower part, then changes to a 43-degree angle as the pyramid rises. Inaccessible to the general public since 1965, the 331-foot-tall structure received much-needed restoration work, where experts fixed internal and external stairs, and added lighting and repaired stonework into the corridors and chambers of the pyramid, but the design of the pyramid may not have been planned. Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities shared that the architecture architectural direction of the pyramid shifted because cracks began to show in the structure during construction, indicating it was unstable. After multiple attempts at building various pyramids, including the medium pyramid, which had too much of an acute angle, and the smaller red pyramid temples made from red limestone and smooth sides, it seems that Snefru was happy with his construction of the bent pyramid. It now stands as a symbol of changes in the methods used to build those final resting places of Egypt's ancient pharaohs. Buda Castle Labyrinth. Dating back to nearly 500,000 years, the Buda Castle Labyrinth is a series of eerie caverns and chambers that were carved out of limestone by hot springs. The castle served multiple purposes. It was first used by prehistoric humans as a storage facility for food and water. At various points throughout the Middle Ages, it was a refuge and thereafter served as a wine cellar, a torture chamber, and a prison. During the 20th century, the site was used as a military hospital, a bunker, and a secret facility, according to introducingbudapest.com. The tunnels were eventually forgotten about and were discovered in 1930 during work on an urban development project. Bones and other artifacts were found inside, and the caves were subsequently opened up to the public for exploration. Situated beneath a 13th century palace known as the Buda Castle and what was once the Roman city of Aquincum, the labyrinth contains over 3,937 feet of zigzagging corridors that are filled with statues, fountains, pillars, and paintings. Aztec Skull Tower. A terrifying tower of human skulls originally uncovered in 2015 Mexico is now believed to be much larger than ever thought. Believed to be gifts to the gods, the Tower of Skulls was built between 1486 and 1502. Initially, the Huayzompantli had a believed 484 skulls stacked and mortared into one sinister towering display. But as researchers continued to excavate, they found an additional 119 skulls to add to the structure. Found in the Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan, modern-day Mexico City, it is just one of 7 similar structures mentioned as far back as 1521 by Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez, who conquered the Aztecs and claimed Mexico on behalf of Spain. Raised not long after the conquistadors found them, the toppled remains of the towers had been previously hidden until archaeologists unearthed this new section. It might seem strange that displaying severed heads of captured warriors was common in Mesoamerica, but these Zompantli had a surprise in store. Some of the skulls in the new discovery belonged to 3 children, whose skulls were identified by their size and development of their teeth, and a number of women. Previously, researchers thought the skulls in the structure only belonged to defeated male warriors, so the recent analysis was very important in bringing this newfound evidence to light. The skulls were found at the ruins of the Aztec religious center Templo Mayor near the Metropolitan Cathedral in Mexico City, which was built over the 14th and 15th century ruins. First discovered in 2015 by archaeologists, the tower sits on a site dedicated to the war god Huitzilopochtli and the rain god Tlaloc. Whether the skulls belong to prisoners, warriors, or captives kept for sacrificial ceremonies, all became important and were dressed and treated as personifications of the deities themselves, making the site and the remains displayed there one of the most impressive archaeological finds in recent years. Viking travel route artifacts. The warming climate isn't necessarily a cause for celebration, but historians have no doubt been able to look on the bright side of the global crisis. As ice began to melt in a mountain range in Norway, it revealed a previously unknown important trade network. Even more exciting is the trove of Viking artifacts that came to light as a result of the warming temperatures. Evidence that the Vikings sourced raw material from all over, the site offered up about 8,000 artifacts that had been frozen in the mountain range for more than 1,000 years. A leather shoe, a woolen mitten, and a tunic were just some of the objects found by archaeologists. Other items including feathered arrowheads, horseshoes, walking sticks, and kitchen utensils found along the path marked by stone cairns, which were mounds used as a landmark on hilltops. Piecing these artifacts together allowed researchers to determine that travelers moved through the mountains periodically, despite how remote they were and how harsh the weather conditions. The newly discovered route was believed to be in use between the years 300 and 1500 AD. The path was one of special significance, allowing researchers to determine that other seemingly impossible ways, such as this, were not necessarily barriers, but important communication routes for ancient people. Chan Chan statues. The ancient city of Chan Chan is in ruins, but it was once the world's largest adobe city, the biggest city in the Americas, and the Chimu civilization capital. Located along the northern Peruvian coast near modern-day Trujillo, Chan Chan was home to 10,000 structures at its height around 600 years ago. The city was wealthy and boasted a population of roughly 80,000 residents. There were streets, passageways, 30-foot-high walls, and ornate palaces and temples. In 2018, archaeologists discovered a collection of 20 bizarre wooden statues lined up along a ceremonial corridor. Dating back an estimated 800 years, they're the site's oldest sculptures and some of the oldest artifacts ever found at Chan Chan, period. Each statue is a little over 2 feet tall and one of them is female, which experts say is very uncommon. Researchers believe that they guarded important people's tombs. The Chimu Empire lasted from 850 until the Incas conquered them in 1470 AD, at which point Chan Chan was deserted. Its remaining ruins are endangered, especially as increasingly severe weather due to climate change like El Nino batters what's left of this fascinating UNESCO World Heritage Site. Saxon Cave House. Earlier in 2021, an underground house located in the Anchor Church Caves in England was surveyed and determined to be similar to Saxon architecture. Cut directly into the sandstone, the home with its narrow arched doorways and rock-cut pillars for support dated to the early 9th century. The house was surveyed by researchers from the Royal Agricultural University and Wessex Archaeology, who found a striking resemblance to a nearby crypt that belonged to Saxons, a group that lived in England in the early Middle Ages and were immigrants from northern Germany and southern Scandinavia. During their research, scientists surveyed the space, which included 3 rooms and a chapel, which further led them to wonder if it could have once been the dwelling of a local king who was forcefully removed from office. King Eardwulf, who ruled Northumbria until 806, was buried only 5 miles from the cave when Vikings were raiding Britain. Later named Saint Hardulf, the king supposedly lived in the cave alone, becoming a bit of a recluse, but also a living saint who had disciples who would come to him for consultation. It wasn't uncommon for deposed Saxon kings to take up this role, living as monks or hermits as a way of keeping their status instead of being removed from their position. Apparently, the king-turned-monk wasn't the only one who took a liking to cave life. In the 18th century, a local landowner modified the cave by adding brickwork and window frames so he could host dinners in the cell. It's a unique glimpse into Anglo-Saxon England. The cave house has survived in plain sight, and has not only history, but folklore attached to it. Holehenge. Located on the Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England, the site of the Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument well known across the globe. One of the most studied archaeological landscapes, the massive prehistoric structure gets a lot of attention, but recent excavations by experts reveal what could be the biggest prehistoric site in the UK. A prehistoric ring that is 16 feet deep with 33-foot wide shafts located 2 miles from the Stonehenge is even bigger than the famed Neolithic Ring of Stones. Discovered by archaeologists at the University of Bradford using remote sensing technology, at least 20 prehistoric shafts were found in a pit structure made of partial circles that stretch about 1.2 miles in diameter. Using radiocarbon dating, researchers discovered that the shafts were dug around 2500 BC. Although scientists still don't know the purpose of the site, it shows that complex monumental structures within the landscape were built by Neolithic communities. The large dimension of the Circle of Wells makes it the largest Neolithic site in the United Kingdom, significantly larger than any comparative prehistoric monument in Britain. It's another fascinating glimpse into British prehistory and landscape archaeology. Skull Ring. Earlier this year, metal detectorist David Balfour found an eerie gold ring bearing the image of a skull while treasure hunting in the Welsh community of Carrigova. The skull is made from white enamel and is surrounded by an inscription stating Memento Mori, a Latin phrase meaning remember that you die. Based on its style, shape, and script, experts believe that the ring was crafted between 1550 and 1650. Its sinister theme symbolizes the high mortality of the time, as well as the vanity and brevity of life, according to a statement from Mark Redknapp of the National Museum of Wales. Memento Mori was a common theme in artwork at certain points throughout history. While items like this tend to strike us as morbid, they were actually intended as a somewhat optimistic reminder to make the most of one's fragile and short time on Earth. South Wales Central Senior Coroner Graham David Hughes officially classified the spooky jewelry and several other valuable artifacts as treasure. This designation automatically transferred ownership of the object to the UK government. The other less creepy items include 3 hoards of gold and silver coins, gold and silver jewelry, and personal accessories dating back between the 9th and 17th centuries. Neanderthal bone art. Unicorn Cave is the largest cave in the western part of the Harz Mountains in Germany. It has been a hotbed of not only exploration, but myth. As far back as the Middle Ages, people have entered the cave in search of unicorn bones, which they believe would provide special medicine when combined with powdered gold and silver. While bones have indeed been found there, they're believed to be the fossilized bones of long-extinct cave bears and other large mammals. But that hasn't stopped the search in the infamous cave. In 2019, the infamous cave would provide something even more interesting than the bones of fabled animals. An archaeozoologist who specializes in identifying animals from the distant past came across the knuckle bone of a large hoofed animal. But when he took a closer look at the bone, which was about the size of a chess piece, he noticed 10 deep slanting lines cut into the bone on one side. While one might immediately think the cuts were the result of an ancient man cutting into the bone in search of meat or marrow, the marks were too intentional. That's when it clicked. The lines were an abstract pattern or decorative design. Located in hills halfway between Frankfurt and Berlin, the cave was known for being used by early modern humans and their Neanderthal ancestors. But the mysterious bone and its carving dated to about 51,000 years old, created at least 1,000 years before modern humans ever arrived there. This made the find even more astonishing than previously thought. Neanderthals had always been assumed to be incapable of creativity or complex thought, but the pattern carved into the bone was evidence that culture and the birth of art may have started centuries before anyone could have previously imagined. Plague mask. It's difficult to prevent the spread of germs, especially viruses, even with modern technology and knowledge, as we're learning amid the ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic. For quite some time, nobody, including doctors, knew how the plague spread. Nevertheless, they tried their best to shield themselves from it with a bizarre beak mask that covered the wearer's face and shielded their eyes with a glass lens. The beak portion of the covering contained 2 small breathing holes and vinegar-soaked herbs or sponges, which people thought filtered diseased air. This terrifying mask is just one component of the ensemble that doctors wore to prevent the plague from infecting them. They also donned a full-length cloak-like garment and a wide-brimmed leather hat. To add to the costume's already disturbing nature, doctors examined patients, took their pulse, and pointed at their body parts from a safe distance with a wooden stick. A nonsensical burial. In 2019, archaeologists unearthed dozens of strangely ordinary burials at the Saqqara necropolis, a vast burial ground for royal and elite members of ancient Egyptian society. None of the graves belonged to high-ranking priests, government officials, or leaders, and the individuals were laid to rest haphazardly at best. Dating back roughly 2,000 years, the burials likely contained the remains of non-elite members of society, including those hailing from the working or middle class. This would explain the clumsy and careless manner they were found in. In an interview with the Polish press, Egyptologist Kamil Kuraszkiewicz described the graves as modest and said that the deceased were afforded only basic embalming treatments. Simply put, they were wrapped in bandages and put into the ground. Kuraszkiewicz and his team discovered the poorly preserved mummies in 2018 while excavating in between the 4,600-year-old Pyramid of Djoser and a rectangular ditch called the Dry Moat. Many of the graves were looted and/or heavily damaged by the hands of time and the harsh elements. But some contained evidence of the tomb's occupants, including one coffin bearing imitation hieroglyphics and a painting of a necklace. The artisan who crafted the coffin was illiterate and possibly trying to recreate hieroglyphics based on some he'd seen before, according to Kuraszkiewicz. In any case, he pointed out the characters were incoherent. The coffin also features images that Kuraszkiewicz endearingly described as beautifully clumsy figures of Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the underworld. These modest burials offer a rare glimpse into how ordinary people were laid to rest during ancient Egyptian times, and how Egypt structured its society between 2,000 and 2,500 years ago. An anonymous ancient stranger. Earlier this year, archaeologists discovered the remains of a single nameless person beneath the Catherine Dowley house. It's a former nursing home in Leicestershire, England that is slated for demolition. They were radiocarbon dated to sometime between 635 and 685 AD. Onlooker Hilary Lawrence, who is also a neighbor and former history teacher, described the discovery as eerie and mentioned that some believe the remains were there before the nursing home was built. Speaking with British news agency SWNS, she said that nobody had a clue who the deceased individual was. Another onlooker named Keith Hallam commented that the bones were found just below the ground surface. Experts are conducting further research to learn as much as possible about the person who was laid to rest at the site all alone 1,400 years ago and the circumstances surrounding their death. Thanks for watching. Which one of these discoveries do you find the most fascinating? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!